Okay, so this is a simple tutorial on basic Revit construction components that we are going to move through to 3D printing. So we are really beginning at the beginning here, and then we're going to track this all the way through to fabricating this Revit model on a 3D printer. So let's start with the default Revit template and the basic wall tool. So I'm going to go wall. This is a project that has a 2x6 exterior stud wall. So right out of the gate, I know that I do not have a wall type in Revit that is a 2x6 stud wall. And that's all that I'm really interested in. I'm not concerned about exterior, interior finishes right now. I just want a basic 2x6 stud wall. And unfortunately, the generic 6-inch wall is literally a 6-inch wall. So let's just take that and do edit type and duplicate. And let's just call that a 2x6 wood stud wall. Then I can go to the structure and change that 6 inches to 5.5 or 5.5 inches, which is the thickness of a 2x6, right? So I've got now a 5.5 inch thickness on my 2x6 wall system here. So we'll say okay to that. And as I am sketching in walls, you'll note that the default in terms of walls, it's drawing it in at level 1. It is unconnected, 20 feet tall. And it's drawing by wall center line. What that means is as I'm drafting in the first left click, it's drawing the wall in by the center line, which is kind of okay for some people. My preference, though, as I'm drawing, like if I do this as a 25-foot long wall and then close this out as a rectangle, when I run a dimension, annotate, align, and let's not dimension again wall center line. I've never had a contractor like wall center lines except for very rare occasions. Usually they like wall faces. So if I dimension here to here, I don't actually get 25 feet because I was drawing in by wall center line. If, however, I select architecture, wall, and exterior face as a drawing method, so now when I'm drafting, I can see I'm drawing the edge of the wall. And if I don't like the edge that I'm drawing, I can use the space bar and flip the wall to either direction. But now if I go over 25 feet and begin to close this up, I will see that my dimension strings annotate aligned, exterior edge to exterior edge, 25 feet. So that's just more convenient to me as you are learning Revit to change that particular default, right? So let's go architecture, wall. I'm drawing by exterior face. I want level 1 to connect to level 2. And I'm going to draw a very, very small space here as part of our micro house. This is going to go 10 by 8 as a rectangle. Then if I go up to level 2, I should be able to see that rectangle. And why I can see that as a gray line is if I scroll down on my view properties, I will see level 2 as an underlay, or excuse me, level 1 as an underlay. Okay, so on my level 2, I can now sketch in the upper level walls. Wall, and let's run from here. Let's go over 20, down 8, and close this up. And let's, oops, trim those two walls together. And let's go ahead and add in a floor. So architecture and floor. And so this is a default 12-inch floor, which is, I'm okay with that. I don't need to change that number. If I did, edit type and edit the structure, and right there is where I would change the number. Let's go ahead and hold on to that as a 12-inch floor. And let's just go edge to edge on those upper level walls. We'll green checky box that, and I'm going to get this notification. Do I want to attach the floor or the walls to the floor? And again, as you are learning Revit, you're going to get this command walls to floor, walls to roof, things like that. And I would really sincerely suggest, as you're learning Revit, do these things manually. Don't let Revit model for you. Learn those commands and see what it's doing so that you'll understand your model. Okay, so what that was saying is these walls are going to overlap with that floor. And we just need to clean that up really quick. But on occasion, that's going to do something that you didn't intend. And that's why, again, students of Revit, as you're learning, do this manually. So I'm just going to tab and select all of those lower walls, attach base, and attach them to the floor. So I now have this basic configuration, sort of this micro house entry and this sort of cantilever piece that I am going to send to the 3D printer, okay, with some additional elements. Let's talk next about getting some doors and windows into this, okay? So if I go to my level 1 view, I would like an exterior door right here, please. So let's go door, and we're just going to stick with the default doors, a 36-inch by 80, as very much a residential standard. And I am going to put that opening out, which is not the residential standard. Usually doors for a residence are going to open in, and I can modify that with these little widgets right here. But in this case, the space is so stinking small. We're going to have that open out, okay? We'll look at loading a different door type here in just a bit. But calculations are super important on this. So as I'm working through, I need to stay within an area constraint. And one of the tools that's going to help me with that is this room tag. So if I select my room tag, I can move into this space and left click, and that is going to give me a room name and a room number. And both of those are super important to the profession. Academically speaking, maybe the room name is important, but it's a little easier sometimes when you're doing a presentation board or something like that to do these either in Photoshop or with a key legend, something like that. These names and numbers can kind of distract visually on your floor plans, so I don't always recommend those being in. But the thing that is nice here is I can select this tab and click Edit Type and turn on Show Area, so that as I am working through a plan, I can keep a running tab on are my square footages staying close to my floor plan. And as I make modifications to the design, like moving that wall out, I can see that that number is going to constantly update for me no matter where I push those walls until I break them. And by that I mean if I break a wall, that room's no longer enclosed and I will get an error there. Let's change this to 1/4 inch so that room tag's a little easier to see. All right, so next thing that I want to do with this lower level is add in a few windows. So under the window tab, the default Revit window, just if it's a simple punched opening, is perfectly fine to use for just about everything. I can certainly load in more windows, but I've typically found just editing this does, I don't know, just about 90% of the windows that I ever need to do. So I'm going to go to Edit Type, and I don't really want a 3x4. I really want like a, let's say a 4x4 or something like that. So I'm just going to look and see if it's in there. It's not. So let's duplicate that window. I'm just going to call it a 4x4 and say OK. So my height is good, 4 feet. Let's change the width to 4 feet. And now I have sort of this nice square window. And I'm going to place one here and one here. And again, typically, I'm going to want the window glass closer to the outside edge. That's typically how windows work in buildings. Okay, so next, I know that this is sort of my kitchen cooking space for this micro house. So I am going to want to go ahead and put in a counter across here. And I just want to keep it super simple. I'm not going to go component and find kitchen tables and kitchen counters, stuff like that. Those are great and they can look good in renderings if you touch them up correctly. But what I want is something that is going to fabricate on the 3D printer correctly. So I'm going to activate components and model in place and build a really simple generic model that begins to define in my geometry where a kitchen counter would be. So that's going to be done with a generic model and an extrusion. I'm simply going to draw this in 2 feet rather, across and over. Let's do this one 2 feet off of this wall and over. And then let's attach that to the outside or the inside edge of my wall. Delete my guides. And then I'm going to trim my pieces together. Just like that. My overall height, typical counter height, would be 3 feet. Green checky box. And now I have a counter right across that interior surface. So if I look at this in 3D, you can now kind of just barely see it through the window right there, working really well. I also know I need to add in a floor for this first level as well. So let's go back to level 1. Green checkbox to close out the component. And let's do architecture, floor, and let's just do a floor that extends around all of that. And just because we probably should, let's extend that out so I have an entry to that lower level as well. So now I have something coming together like this. And maybe perhaps that floor will help balance this cantilever for my physical model. Probably not, but glue and tape will also do that for me as well. Okay, so let's carry on. Let's go back up to my level 2. And let's put an interior dividing wall in here someplace, like right about here. And again, micro house. This is sort of the main bathroom, not main bathroom, it's the only bathroom. And I really don't want a door swing to eat up the space that I have on the inside. So I want to put a pocket door or something like that in. And Revit gives us a default door type that's just an opening in a wall. That's really handy to begin converting to a pocket door. And again, for an academic project, I'm really only interested in just creating that opening. I will draft in later what a pocket door detail should look like. So I'm just going to go door, and this time I'm going to load family because it's not in by default. I'm going to go to my doors, and there is a door type that's just called door opening. And it is exactly what you think it is. It's just an opening for a door. And if I look at my list, again, I have default sizes. We'll take 36 by 80. Actually, I need to be smaller than that. Let's do 30 by 80. And let's place that door opening in my level 2. Door 30 by 80. Let's go right about here. So that gives me room for, and let's push this over just a bit. Let's do a quick annotation or a quick model line here. So we can kind of get this as close to this edge as possible. Oh, come on, Dave. Misclicks. Model line. I did it twice in a row. There we go. Let's take this door. Let's move it as close to that edge as possible so that I can create as large of a shower as I possibly can for a micro house. And now I know I would have another counter right here. So let's do component, model in place. This is another generic model. Okay, and okay. So this is another extrusion, this time happening with an arc from that edge to that edge to this edge. So that I can get as much counter space as I can squeezed in. Again, another 3-foot tall counter. And again, if I look at that 3D, I have that coming together. Level 2. So at this point, then, I would also have like a little shower basin here. So component, model in place. Probably don't have enough to do something like, in terms of the fidelity of a 3D printer, to do like a glass door or something like that here. But I can certainly sort of show that raised shower platform. So let's do that as a 2'10" by 3-foot raised shower basin, so that's about a 1-inch thing. Let's do a 2-inch thing. A 2-inch thing up above the floor plate that then would also have create a really thin partition. So let's just do that as another extrusion right here. So sort of a thin-ish shower partition, and we'll make that, let's send that up about 4 feet. Well, it should be taller than 4 feet. Let's go 7 feet. Make that tall enough that we can enclose that really nicely. So you can see that coming together here. Finished model, and let's add one more detail to the bathroom, which would be a toilet. So toilets, architecture component. It would be great if that was in our default template, but there's not one anywhere. So I am going to go to load family. And let's go back up from doors. It should be in plumbing. Plumbing. MEP. Fixtures. Water closets. Water flush tank. And we can place that in. And again, I'm not interested in this as a 3D model at all. What I'm interested in is tracing that out so that I can have that as part of the print, part of my 3D print. So I'm just using this for reference. So again, let's just select this dude and let's add it into that family, create extrusion, and I am just going to do a really fast tracing of this. So that does something like this, and this edge does something like that. Sneak that in to balance it out. I'm going to do a split on my ellipse and a trim, and then add one more line here and one more trim. And a toilet is about 18 inches, shave less probably, but let's just do it at an 18-inch height. Finish the model, and now I can delete that I used as a guide. So again, if we look at this in 3D, I have all these sort of printable fixtures that help explain to my client or to whoever is viewing this project how this is going to work. In this living area off to the side, I might add one or two more things like a quick chair. So again, I can go component and I could load in a chair. I'm not sure any chairs or anything are loaded in the default. They aren't, so let's do load family, back, 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 and there is a furniture folder. Let's do seating and a basic chair, just so that I have something for reference on size. Okay, so again, the Bauer chair is a lovely little chair, super nice, but that is not going to print. That is going to print like a little small pile of spaghetti in the middle of my model and break things. However, if I'm on my level 2, again, I can go component, model in place, and generic. And again, I can use this as a very quick guide. Just sort of draw a box. And again, chairs are typically about 18 inches. And I'm just going to use that. I'm not even going to worry about the seating or the chair back. I'm just going to use that as an object that begins to show what I'm thinking the seating would do as part of a living room. Push that around and maybe stretch that out and do maybe a slightly larger seat, something like that. So I can now delete that chair. And again, this is getting at that idea. These are very, very small spaces, but it's starting to show how furniture would work and what the scale of that would be inside of this particular space, right? And then somewhere in here that converts to a sleeping thing. And I don't know exactly what that is. That's for a later date to resolve. So second floor needs a door. Architecture, door. Exterior doors better be 36 inches. So let's put that in as another 36-inch door. And since that is, walking to an edge and then you're falling off, let's go ahead and select that floor and edit the boundary, and let's just pull that out so that I can begin to see how I would have some kind of external circulation, vertical circulation that would take this to that, and then this enters into those. Okay, so yeah, this is kind of where it needs to go for right now. Now, I've talked about adding these as punched openings. There's another way often that's really beneficial to adding windows into Revit, and that is cutting a hole in the wall first and then adding a curtain wall system in next. So especially if I have a large window that's going to have mullions on the inside, it's a technique that I really use quite a bit. So in this case, I would select this wall, and rather than going architecture window, I am going to select the wall and edit the profile. So editing the profile allows me, let's just use this 3D front view. It allows me to go ahead and say, let's use these lines to begin creating an opening. So I'm going to offset, and let's do a 1 foot offset from the side, the bottom, and the top. And then let's draw in, about 4 feet over from this edge, my vertical. So again, I'm going to trim these interior lines. There we go. I'm going to delete my guide. Now, as a lot of things in Revit go, this has to be closed loops. So all of these lines are connected. These are lines inside of those exterior lines, but everything is a closed loop. And so when I green checkbox this, I have a huge window opening here. Now I don't have glass in there yet, but I would use the curtain wall tool to add that glass in another process. I'm going to do the same thing here. Edit profile, offset a foot, and a foot. But I don't really want, this sort of wild exposure into a private area. So we'll do an offset. Let's set that up about 4 feet from the bottom. And we'll do some sight lines later to see if that's going to work and maintain a level of privacy. But it kind of feels okay right now. Maybe. Maybe that should be up a little bit higher. But let's work from there. This is now about ready to send to the 3D printer, right? But I've got a few modifications that I still need to make. First, the 3D printer does not know a window from a wall from anything else. So it's going to try and print that as solid geometry. So I don't want the windows in there at all. I just want, for an architectural modeling, I am perfectly content with that just being an opening. So I'm going to select one of my windows. I am going to right click and I'm going to say hide in view category. But before I do that, let's go back a step. That would be modifying this default 3D view. And what might be beneficial right now is to set up a specific view for 3D printing. So let's right click on that 3D and say duplicate view and duplicate. And then let's rename this. And I usually use a prefix of ZZ, print level 1, because I am going to need to split this into 2 levels to print well for me. Right, so now I have something that's specifically called out. My lists are usually alphabetized, not usually, they are alphabetized. So as I make multiple 3D views, these print views, which I don't access very often, will be in the bottom of my list with that ZZ prefix. Now I won't be modifying my default 3D view, but a specific print view. So let's hide the windows, hide in view, category. So all of my windows that are in my model are now gone. They're just openings. And let's do the same thing with doors, hide in view, category. Now my doors are gone. They're just openings. But again, for an architectural model, exactly what I want. Is just the openings. And now with 3D printing, specifically we're using FDM extrusion, filament-based models, right? So this is a pretty good span, but we also have pretty good printers here. We're running Prusas. You'll see the slicing software in just a second here. Pretty confident in that span. There might be just a little bit of droop of plastic, but as long as we are not cantilevering an edge, printing that as an opening will work great. Now this is a cantilever. It's not going to print that at all. this is a cantilever. I cannot print that in this format. Because I have furniture, I also can't really print this upside down. So I'm going to divide this into a top and bottom half. And then once I have them out of the 3D printer, I can just simply stack one on top of the other. And I might choose to glue them together and make that permanent, or as we like to do a lot of times with architectural models, I just let it be so I can take it apart and see inside all of the spaces. So to do that, to start splitting these, really simple trick. Again, my properties for this axonometric view, ZZ Print Level 1, if nothing is selected, the properties for that view will allow me to come down and turn on my section box. With the section box activated, I'm going to select the top edge of that section box, and I'm going to pull it down so that it is just below that cutoff for the floor above. So when I export this, it is going to export only what is visible from that section box. Okay, so I'm going to go File, Export, CAD, STL, Save. So this is Project 4, 3D View 1, ZZ Print Level 1. Okay, let's duplicate my print level 1, and we will rename that Level 2. So again, I can turn on my section box, which is right here. I'm going to take the bottom edge of that section box and slam it to the top. I'm going to deselect my section box and then grab the top edge and pull that up. Now you're going to notice there's a pinch of a little remainder of walls right here. And if I was printing this out, at a huge scale, like, I don't know, 1 inch equals a foot, maybe this would matter. Maybe this would be something that you'd pick up on the physical model. But as this case would go, I'm just going to sneak this up. I'm cutting out, I don't know, maybe a 64th of an inch, maybe 1/128th of an inch out of my model. I don't care. It's going to be just fine. So that I eliminate that little pinch of wall so that it prints on that flat surface simply by taking that bottom edge. And again, I just cheated that up into that floor just a little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to do File, Export, CAD, STL, Save, and OK. So those are now both ready to go into my slicing software. So let's open up Prusa Slicer, File, Import, STLs. There's my two views, 1 and 2. Let's just open both of them. And I need to open up my scale calculator. Scale calculator. Probably 1/4 inch models, because again, these are super small. So 1 inch equals 4 feet. So my scale calculator is 634.75%. That seems big. I'm a little scared. 634.75. Yeah, that's huge. That's going to be too big. Let's see how they look anyway. So let's kind of slide those two models around. If I can separate them. Well, let's just start over with that anyway. File, import. Let's bring them in one at a time. Those seemed very much merged. Level 1, open. 634.75. Yeah, that's too big. I mean, that's a very big model. That's a couple of inches. That's like 4 inches by 4 inches, something like that. That's just a lot of stuff for not a lot of data. So let's change that back down to an 1/8 inch scale. So 1 inch equals 8 feet. So now I'm 317.37% as my scale factor. 313.7. Double check that number. 317.37. 317.37%. There we go. Okay, so there's my lower level. File, import. Level 2. Same thing. That was 317.37. 317.37. It wasn't 37, it was 34. 317.37. Nope, that's right. Okay, so I have both of these objects. Both of these are now ready to print. And you can see something on here. I ran through this assignment. These are slightly different models. I don't have that floor extension. Um, that's why those aren't showing up. Those larger pieces of floor that are coming out on both of those. So I apologize about that. It's same model. It's just as I was doing a work through on this. But these are both now ready to slice. So let's run them as an infill of 5%. Super fast draft. I'm totally fine with that. I really do not need any supports, even though I have these sort of openings for windows, things like that. But I'm totally okay with that. 1 hour and 17 minutes. And I've got a really solid conceptual model at 1/8" scale. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Love doing these. Love the fact that I can do lots of them and iterate over and over and over again and just have the printers create multiple options, whether I'm moving around only furniture and seeing how that impacts the space, or whether I'm coming up with different design formal configurations. All of those are really nice and again, super, super fast to do.